going back to your law career a little bit. So you started early in your law career. You were focusing on the area of mergers and acquisitions. Do I remember that correctly from our prep call?
Yes, that's exactly right. So that was how I first became acquainted with open source. As I mentioned, I started out in law firms and I was splitting my time and my caseload between software licensing clients and patent clients who wanted to patent software inventions. But that wasn't quite enough to fill my entire docket. So I got involved with the mergers and acquisitions team. They needed somebody to work on specific tech deals where there was diligence going on, and they came across this thing called open source and said, hey, you go figure this out, you've got a computer degree. Okay, great. So I started to delve into what these open source licenses meant and how to interpret them. And here's where open source sits in this really interesting place. It is a merger of community, technology, and those legal underpinnings that we've already talked about: trade secret, patents, copyrights, and even trademark law comes into play with open source. So it's a little bit like learning a foreign language. You can pick up a book written in another language and you could translate it word for word, and you would be technically correct. You would have that translation, but you would miss a world of the nuance associated with that book written in that other language because you don't know the language. Open source license interpretation, I think, is very similar to that because you can look at the language of the license itself, but if you don't consider the overall project that is involved, the use case that you're applying it to, the history of either the project or even the license development, the sensitivities of the community that engage with either or both of those things, and any legal actions that may have occurred in the past, even if they didn't ultimately lead to a decision by a court of law, you are not going to understand what that license really means or how to apply it or advise your client ultimately. One example of this, the BusyBox lawsuits, those were settled. So you didn't have a decision by a court of law, but they're often cited as one of the litigations that gives heft to the enforcement of copyleft licensing.
I never even thought of that, like the difference between settlement versus having that court ruling.
So as an attorney for a law firm, my job was to interpret the law for my clients and also to understand their point of view and advocate on behalf of them and figure out how can I make these two things meet in the middle, what their goals and objectives are versus whatever the legal situation is that I was evaluating. In the early 2000s, corporate attitudes toward open source were maybe not quite fearful, but they were definitely cautious and maybe even a little suspicious of open source, at least in certain sectors. In the area of M&A, or mergers and acquisitions, I had to evaluate whether there was something that might negate the value of a particular deal that a client wanted to engage in. The business has generally already decided that this makes good business sense by the time you've hired a law firm to do the M&A deal. They've decided this makes a lot of sense for our business, for our objectives. So my job was effectively to determine whether or not there was something that would negate the value of that deal or potentially raise a flag to say, hey, put the brakes on this, you might want to reconsider or do something different.